People, we're back in Portsmouth, and this week we've got Becky Lodge.
I'm an entrepreneur based in Portsmouth. I was born on the edge of a council estate in 1971 in Leicester, and I am testament to the fact that if you work hard and you can get an education, that you can work your way up the corporate ladder to the very top. I had left corporate and I thought I knew, I thought I probably knew a lot, and then I realised I knew nothing. Startup is less about running a business and more about the emotional and psychological journey that you're undergoing to actually find out who you are. 80% of startups fail in the first 5 years and 97% fail by year 10. I'd actually started to talk to other people who were saying it's really lonely and I don't talk to anybody and I'm working 12 hours a day and my family don't get it and I don't know what to do and my marriage is under strain. And I was like, oh, hang on a minute, I can't be the only person that feels like this. And now I run the largest startup and small business community in the Solent region.
Becky.
We're not going to go very far, is it? We're giggling all day.
Yeah, Becky, welcome to the What's Going On show.
Thank you so much. I'm really super excited to be here.
No, it's great to have you on the show. And it's good that we finally got round to it.
I know.
You're a busy woman. You're hard to pin down.
Yeah, well, you're also a busy man.
I know.
So
I know.
The diaries are like...
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Skew. But we made it here and we're here.
And we're here at last.
So we're in the university building.
Yep.
With a double-facing mirror. What do you call it? A double-edge mirror?
A two-way mirror.
Two-way mirror. Look at that. Hope no one's behind it. I'm joking. All right, cool. So, welcome to the show. Show where we shine a light on people doing things in communities. And you yourself, you're doing a lot in the community. And we're going to go a bit into that today and find out the backstory.
Cool.
So, without further ado, I've got a little tradition on this show. And... instead of me giving you an introduction, I'd like to just give it straight over to you. So who in a nutshell is Becky Lodge?
Where do I begin? How long have you got? So I'm an entrepreneur, multi-award winning entrepreneur and small business owner based in Portsmouth. I was born on the edge of a council estate in 1971 in Leicester. And I am testament to the fact that if you work hard and you can get an education, which was free when I was younger, that you can work your way up the corporate ladder to the very top. I've spent 30 years in STEM-based industries, so I've worked in everything from technology to Formula One, which sounds really sexy and exciting, of course it is. And now I run the largest startup and small business community in the Solent region. We've helped 10,000 founders and SMEs raise about £6 million through financing and debt and equity financing. We've helped them start up, and I started that in a pub in Portsmouth, just off Osborne Road in Southsea, I think it's called the Apsley Arms, I might have got that wrong, with 9 people in 2016, and we moved to a much bigger pub because we couldn't get 150 people in a year when we started to grow it. And we just accelerated really fast because there was a lot of people who were left out of the public sector offering that was around at the time. I've won awards for that work. I've won awards for my work in diversity, equity and inclusion in Britain. In Sky News in 2018 recognised me for that work. I'm part of a parliamentary party group on internet technology and also technology in Britain. This year I won the Women in Data and Technology Award from Women in Data for my work in as a woman in data and technology. And I'm just a great big nerd. And that probably about covers it. As otherwise we'd be here for a decade at least, I would think, trying to explain exactly what it is I do. But I just really enjoy helping people. And obviously I met you on the community circuit in Portsmouth, and I just really like helping people who've got great ideas, particularly neurodivergent people. I'm also neurodivergent. I've got ADHD, which has helped and hindered me during my career. But really, for me, it's been about how do we help get more inclusion and diversity across everything, including business. And that's kind of really me in a nutshell.
Okay, a lot to unpick.
I know.
You've done a lot, congrats.
Yeah, thanks.
And I guess the only way to start is at the beginning.
Yeah.
So, whereabouts did you grow up?
I grew up in Leicestershire. So I grew up in a place called Glenfield, which is like a suburb of Leicester. But I was born at home just off Uppingham Road in Leicester, on the edge of a council estate, the infamous Rowletts Hill council estate. Both my parents were student, sort of just coming out from being student teachers when I was born at home, which was very rare, but it was the 70s. Things were a little bit more, I suppose, risky in the 70s, the 60s and 70s. And I went to school. I really liked school. I really enjoyed school. But I was terrible at certain subjects and really good at others. So I had this sort of cognitive dissonance where I was told in one lesson that I would never amount to anything. And then in another lesson I was told I was gifted and that I needed extra homework and extra time on things. So that was quite problematic growing up. But obviously I had a lot of familial support. My grandmother was very influential in my upbringing. My grandparents, my maternal grandparents, were from the valleys of South Wales. They'd grown up with nothing. They had no shoes. They lived in abject poverty in the Great Depression in sort of the 1920s and the 1930s. And I was taught the value of education and money very early on. I went to work at 15, got my first job at 15, and have been working ever since. So that sort of hopefully answers the question.
Yeah, so that's where you went. So you learnt about money early on. And supporting others. I remember you said in your intro that you like to help others. Yeah. Do you think it stems from there?
I think it stems from being brought up in a Welsh community background. I think that the Welsh are very community orientated, and if you've ever been to Wales and ever encountered being, I think matriarchy is very strong in Wales. It's very female focused, very female led communities. And I think that when you have come from abject poverty, community is everything, because you understand that your neighbours can feed you if perhaps you can't feed yourself. And I think that for me that's always what's been very strong throughout my upbringing, and also not to take anything for granted. I think that's a huge thing. Also to just work hard, be yourself, be authentic, and I think that was a key component of my upbringing, which a lot of people aren't happy with now in terms of who I am and how I present myself and how I challenge. But I got that confidence through being mentored by particularly good men throughout my career, who actually said, why are you afraid of speaking up, you know? And I think that very early on, my nan especially was, don't be afraid of who you are. You know, you're just as good as everybody else, if not better. So don't underestimate your own abilities, and don't let anybody put you in a box. And I think she was very strong on that.
Okay. So you say finding your voice.
Yeah.
You say being yourself. You said you had, you know, your nan, strong female figures, great mentors, male mentors throughout your life.
Yeah.
When would you say there was the moment that you came into your own and you found your voice?
I don't think that ever happens if you're a woman. I think you have versions of yourself that you present to people. I think that as a woman, you are whatever you're expected to be, because you have so many roles. Typically for women, it could be mother, parent, aunt, confidant. I think that women mask in different ways and men don't have to. So there will be a professional version of what somebody will you know, what somebody will see professionally will be different from how you are personally. And I think that traditionally for women in my generation, which is Generation X, you weren't allowed to be authentic in the workplaces. You have a corporate version of yourself, which you take to work, because that's what corporate expects of you. And I think that's now problematic, especially as we move into younger generations actually coming into the workplace who can see this inauthenticity in the way that people present. So I think now, since I've passed the age of 50, which is just a watershed moment for women, to answer your question, I just think you get to a point where you realise actually you're closer to the end of life than you are to the start of it. So if you want to be authentic, it better be now. But I think there's parts of yourself that you actually put into work and put into your personal life, and I think your personal life is much more important than your professional life, although people from the outside looking in at me would say that's probably not true in the way that I work or how hard I work or how I present professionally. But I think from my point of view, your family is everything. That's it. You know, it begins and ends with them. Your friendship networks are everything. Your community is everything. And sometimes that's not a popular response. but and it's not a political narrative from my point of view. It's just that's how I was brought up.
Fair. So you mentioned there the corporate woman. What is the corporate woman? What is that personality?
In terms of my personality,
who did you become when you went to work as opposed to who you were at home?
Yeah, I think there's an expectation in corporate because you're chasing the money, and especially because I was in business development and sales at director level for 33 years this year, is that you have to be ruthless. There has to be a ruthlessness that actually is associated with that to become successful. But I think that there's a difference between the way that perhaps men perform in corporate and how women perform. I was very blessed that I became a top 1% sales performer in business exactly because I wasn't that way, because I had empathy and because I did things differently. But that wasn't necessarily a popular narrative with my work colleagues. So I'll give you a couple of examples which people will be very, very shocked about from early on in my career. So when I was very early in my business development career and selling a lot, I had a couple of things happen in terms of people wouldn't believe that they would happen now because the bullying was just through the roof. So, but that's what makes you resilient in certain ways. So I worked in a sales team where the boys, and I was the only girl, and I say girl because I was a lot younger, a young woman at that time, probably in my early 20s. And if you were ahead on target, they would do things to try and scupper you in reaching target or take your sales or, you know, and have the sale rather than you have the sale. And one of their tactics one year was that they decided that they would inject donuts with laxatives and bring them into work and feed them to you. So you would then be off work because obviously you had a dodgy stomach. So that was one of their tactics. In another job that I had, again, I was at the top of the tree from a sales performance point of view. They were getting very, egotistical about it and very frustrated and quite emasculated by the fact that, there was 2 women in this team at this time outperforming what they were doing. They let my tyres down on my company car, so I couldn't get to appointments. I remember being on holiday once and having one of my work colleagues ring up and tell my customers that I'd left the company, even though I was on holiday, so that he could go and see my customers and reach his sales target. So I think it's very interesting when you look at the dynamics of corporate. You become almost a product of the environment that you're brought up in as a woman. And also it's interesting when we look at the language that's used about women in corporate. So if somebody's successful as a woman, they're called aggressive, or they're called bullish, or they're called predatory. And actually, that's not naturally who you are. It's just that you have to be like that in order to survive in that environment. So outside of the environment, I'm very, very different. For anybody that knows me, it's almost like, hang on a minute, it's 2 totally different people. But it goes back to the corporate masking thing that I said, that, a lot of people, you have to present as that in order to be successful. I think I'm less like that now because I'm more comfortable in who I am. But I think certainly, as you know, we talked about this because you're 30 this week, so happy birthday, my darling.
It's next month.
That's all right. Whatever. It might go by the time you might be 30 by the time this goes out. No. But happy birthday for that. And I think you become more comfortable with yourself as you age. So I think a lot of the behaviours are sort of settling down in your 20s, and then you get into your 30s and things change again. And it's sequential over decades. Things change over decades as well. But that's sort of an example of how hideous things can be if you are, as an early stage female in your career. And it's still happening now. I mean, not at the same scale, but we still have, insidious bullying, you have marginalisation in the workplace, you have people not promoting women or people from minorities, which is very, very frustrating because I feel in certain ways we've gone back and we should have moved forward. But I think global gender parity is 233 years away. So I'll be long gone by then.
233
I know. It's not good news, is it, for anybody? It's not great.
Because I was going to ask you there, how has it changed? Because you said you spent 33 years.
Yeah.
So how has it changed? But you said we've gone back.
Yes. Yeah.
So did it ever get better?
I think there was very much a period politically if you look at the political aspects of the UK, I think when Tony Blair came in to power, there was very much a feeling of excitement and optimism. And I was brought up in the Thatcher years, obviously, of consumerism. So I think there was a very positive message around then of women can be anything that they want to be, because obviously we had Thatcher and love her or hate her. She was a very strong female figure that we were growing up with. I think in the creative industries we had things like the X-Files, so they had what they called the Scully effect, would actually help more women into STEM, because you could see the women on screen and you could see women in politics. So I think that inspired my generation, especially in the 90s, to say, hey, we can do anything that we want to do. I think the reality of it is now is that post-COVID, and especially when you have economies contracting, a lot more fear is driven, which we can see in the narrative that we see on the far right at the moment around small boats, the kind of xenophobia that we see. That's all driven by the fear of change and the fear of economic change and economic development. So we have to be careful as a society that we're not falling into the trap that, you know, perhaps other nations are, and also make sure that we're looking after, you know, our own country and our own people, but at the same time we have always been an open country and we've always been welcoming, and we should be humane in our approach to that. So I think there's a lot of change, but in terms of optimism, I would say that sort of period of time, I think in your sort of 20s and 30s is always more optimistic anyway, because you feel like you've got your whole life ahead of you.
Okay, fair. I mean, yeah, you said you suffered severe bullying and it still goes on today.
Yeah.
But why did you, what fueled you? Why did you carry on if you was getting severely bullied? What's the point of going to work?
Because I'm better than everybody else is.
Okay.
And that sounds like a very sociopathic thing to say. I think if you know that you're better, if you constantly win, there's always going to be people who don't want you to. And also there's something for women that makes you very unattractive if you're built that way. And either that's down to my neurodivergence, is that I've always wanted to be the best version of myself, and it isn't about competing against anybody else. It's about me competing because I want to win, because I want to be the best version of myself. If I do something, I want to be able to be good at it. Else, what's the point? And that's a very specific mindset, which not everybody has, and I accept that. But I think for me is, if I was a big believer, and it goes back to what my grandmother taught me, which was, if you outwork people, if you do it quietly, then you will always win. Because when people are out on holiday and people are out socialising and having a drink, I'm at the computer, you know, working 16 hours a day with no breaks. Now, I'm not saying that's great for your mental health, and I absolutely wouldn't recommend it over a prolonged period of time. But what I would say to people is, be mindful that it's always the quietest people that you've got to watch, and also the people who are always the loudest aren't necessarily the cleverest. And I think we've seen that play out in society time and time again. So I think from my point of view, it's about focus. I think being focused is important. And also life's really short. We've got probably about 4,000 weeks in our life. The average age of a woman in the UK is 80.1 years of age, and I'm nearly 54. So I think you become more selective as you age around how do you spend your time, who do you spend it with, your outlook on life changes. And also I always think, how many more people can I help, you know, to reach their dreams, build their dreams. And especially for people from working class backgrounds, it's really important, because you won't get the equality of opportunity that you've often hoped for. So it's about, how do I use the opportunities that I have to help other people, has always been what really drives me.
Okay, fair enough. So you say you're the best, be the best.
Yeah.
Now how do you become the best?
In what context? Because that's a really broad question.
So let's say in sales.
Yeah.
How do you become the best in sales?
I think you listen. I think that a lot of people don't listen enough, and also you give time. And I think that if you don't have empathy, you'll never be any good at selling. But the problem is with selling traditionally is that it's become the home of people who are sociopathic and narcissistic. And also bad salespeople don't help the reputation of salespeople generally. So I was in, I would call, like, very high level trust based environments, which is very different from, you know, maybe the view that people would have from, you know, the local estate agents who are watching. But I think it's the definition of selling for me that's always, you know, been problematic, because if you're working at very high contract values into the multi-millions, those kinds of salespeople are going to be working on very trust-based relationships, very high moral, high ground, very high ethics. Whereas if, you know, you're out in the community trying to screw somebody over for 20 quid as a salesperson, that they're not really the same worlds. So again, I think it depends on the context of how you're asking the question around sales, really.
Okay, let's dive a bit more into sales then.
Yeah.
So would you say there's a step-by-step process of the perfect sale?
Yeah, it's a process, and I think that's what people underestimate. So I was very blessed that I was trained by some of the best in the world. So back in the day, I was on the Tesco graduate management scheme. After I graduated from university, I had very strong mentorship and a lot of money behind me in the early days when I worked in Formula One. I worked for a female entrepreneur who taught me a lot about life and selling, influencing and negotiation. And if you take the context of all of the cost of that, I mean, I would say it was probably, in terms of selling, negotiation and actual training, it's probably into the hundreds of thousands of pounds that were put into me as an employee. So I was very blessed and honoured that I was during a time when that actually happened, because it doesn't happen anymore. There is a process. It's a very defined process of how you take somebody into the sales funnel, how you build rapport with them, how you do test, trial, closing, and once you learn that process, it's fairly simple. But you still have to be good with people, because it's about reading the nuance, the things that aren't said. It's about understanding what the customer might need but doesn't understand that they might need yet. So they might say that they want one thing, but their need is totally different. So it's reading the unread that makes somebody really good, and also not throwing the customer under the bus if it's not best for them. So the issue often has been in sales is if you have a target, you're expected to meet that target on a monthly or a quarterly basis. And most people will go, you know, gung-ho trying to meet that target. But if it's not the best thing for that customer, because you know you've undone the relationship, then there's no point. So it's about making really tough decisions often, because money isn't everything, which sounds like an odd thing for a girl from a council estate to say, because it isn't. Relationships are everything. And that's what makes you successful. So if you look at my LinkedIn profile, for example, I've got nearly 20,000 connections now. And people are like, holy crap, how did you do that? 20 years of hard graft. Those are people that I've met over the course of my career. Now, if you can't buy, you know on Instagram, because you're a social media king, that you can buy followers on Instagram, you can buy followers on Twitter, you can buy followers on most social media platforms, but you can't buy them on LinkedIn. So hard work always pays off, and it really takes time. And if you want to be good at anything, you practice and you get it wrong and you fail all the time. I always say I'm the biggest failure that you'll probably ever meet, because I'm not afraid of failing. Is if I get it wrong, I've learned something, and I'll try and do that as fast as I can. So if I get it wrong, I'm thinking, oh, okay, why did that happen? What have I learned from that? And I would encourage anybody who's certainly younger to fail more often. And I think that in younger generations, when I coach and mentor them, I see that fear of failure. And actually it's about saying, well, you know, everybody comes from a position of, what if I get it wrong? And I'm like, well, what if you get it right? What if it goes right? Because there's a 50-50 chance, my darling, that it's going to go on two ways. So either learn something or you win. So I think it's about reframing how you think about things.
Okay. Just the fear of failure then.
Yeah.
Do you think younger generations fear the failure more?
I feel incredibly sorry for younger generations now. I grew up at a time when we were allowed so much freedom, and that actually gave us a lot of resilience. So literally, you see all the stuff on TikTok about we drank out of hose pipes, and I don't think it was that kind of that extreme. Our parents kicked us out, and we weren't allowed back till dusk. Those things are true. You know, literally on a weekend, I would be out on the street with the other kids. You play in the road, you go off to the local spinney, you build a tree house, and at 7 o'clock, you knew it was come back, and it was tea time or dinner time, depending on when you're from the north or the south. And I think that and I'll use you as an example, as generations haven't had that. You know, people under the age of 30 haven't had that. And also COVID, you know, I mean, I look at my nephew who's now at university, the impact that had on the social agenda of not being able to speak to any friends during lockdown and not being able to socialise is really horrific. So that there's a lot of low confidence barriers that have hit younger generations, and I think that technology is a wonderful thing. I'm absolutely a huge advocate and a lover of technology, but it really doesn't help. And it probably, you know, there needs to be more social stuff for people who are younger. I mean, people have always said, you know, with some of the youth work, there should be, you know, the resurgence of youth clubs. But also, I don't think you should be asking me. I think you should be asking people your age and below, what do you want? What do you need? What do you think? Because I think there's too much in this country of too many old people telling young people what to do. I'm sorry, I'm going to be really unpopular for saying that, but it's like, you know, just because you're old doesn't necessarily mean that you know what's best. And that's why inclusion and involving all voices is like really important, because age teaches you many things, but also it teaches you, especially I see this a lot in my peer group, is people are very risk averse as they age, because they're, you know, I might break something, I might break a leg, or I'm like, oh come on, you know, what's the worst that could happen? You could go out and enjoy yourself. So again, it's very much on your outlook, I think.
Okay, interesting. I mean, I do have to defend myself there. So when I was growing up, literally what you described there, with going out, getting called back at tea, I experienced that.
Good.
And I think like, I don't know, maybe I was one of the last generations, but I'm going a bit deeper into that. Do you think people from a working class background still experience that? And do you think those of a higher class experience that fear of failure and risk averseness, or more because they have more resources given to them?
I don't know. It's interesting because I'm not sure. I don't know enough is the honest answer to be able to answer the question fully. But what I would say is I think working class kids have always had more responsibility younger. I think that, you know, if you look at, I was working at 15, it was to contribute to the household because my dad left and my parents got divorced when I was 16. So it was, my mum was a single parent by the time I went to university. So I think you're kind of given, you know, more almost parental responsibility younger. So I think that could be part of it. There's also things about working class kids, and without getting into the data, it's about are both parents present throughout the whole of the childhood? Often not. So that can be quite an interesting dynamic, whereas if, you know, you're a young male in the household, you might feel, or you might need to step up, or in my case I was two sisters, so, you know, you both had to step up. So I think that's an interesting point of view that you've shared there. I think that social confidence is often lacking depending on how people are brought up, where they're brought up, and whether their parents have both been present. But I think also my generation, which is very odd, which has had so much freedom, have actually become helicopter parents. Now, I'm not a parent myself, but I've seen, you know, certainly where people are ever present all the time in every single one of their children's decisions, and I'm kind of thinking, oh, ease up a bit. It's just, you know, they're like 33. So I think it's a really tough thing to answer, and it's very broad, because actually I think it's down to probably each individual person's experience. But I think for me, working class kids, you're kind of more resilient because you have to be, and I think you're more community focused because you're more worried about, are we going to eat this week? Is everybody in school? Is everybody okay? What do people need? How can I help my neighbours? How can I help each other? Now, that's not all working class areas. I accept that, but certainly that was how I was brought up, and certainly in the Welsh communities, that's and they're still like that now in the Welsh communities and the rural Welsh communities. So I don't think that's changed over a period of my lifetime. But I think it's a really interesting question, which we'll probably debate all year. Quite frankly, it's a good one. I like that question. It's a good one.
Fair. Okay. Cool. So you say you're a woman in tech.
Yeah.
And then you did allude to the fact that, digital age and digital tools and all these aren't good for younger people.
Yeah.
So, as a person in tech,
yeah,
how toxic is the introduction of tech in comparison to its usefulness for young people?
Ooh, that's a strong question. I think tech can be toxic. And I think that and again, this could be a conversation for a whole other series that you and I probably need to run together. And tech can be toxic for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's very male dominated. Secondly, it's not heavily regulated, which is what obviously governments are currently looking at, especially with the emergence of generative AI and AI generally, because that's, if we look at stuff that's particularly toxic for women around AI, is things like revenge porn, is things like image recreation, it could be child exploitation. There's, that's a whole discussion for another day. So I think the most worrying thing is that when you don't get equity and inclusion over any sector, you're always going to see a lot of toxicity. And I think that technology has that ability to be able to be very toxic very quickly. Now, some of the work that we've done with Women in Data, which is one of the largest bodies that globally that helps with the education of women in data and technology, but also educating big companies and big corporates around the world of data and technology, is understanding that having a more diverse workforce is important to actually move away from that toxicity, but also ensuring that any products that are delivered from the technology sector are more equitable. So, for example, I can use it because otherwise it turns into a really highbrow, really boring conversation that nobody wants to listen to. So, for example, if you go to, and let's use a generative AI example that everybody understands. If you go to ChatGPT and you put in, deliver me an image of people in a workplace to use on a social media post, okay, you would think that the image would be generally quite inclusive, but it's not. So you tend to get, and I did a talk on this recently, you get a lot of images of white guys who are wearing button-down shirts, very much sort of tech bro culture. You've got very slim women on there that don't wear glasses, or perhaps they do wear glasses because women with glasses are sexy. And you see a lot of inequality even in that image. And that's because it's coded predominantly by men. So again, you've got to look at how those algorithms are being produced, who's coding those algorithms, and if they're coded equally, if they were coded by women, you might have a bias the other way. So, but perhaps not the toxicity that you would get if it's, very masculine and very male orientated. So for me, it's about how do we get that balance around the inclusion and diversity piece, because that's like more important across the board.
Interesting. So you briefly pointed towards like sexualisation of women in the workplace there.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to give an example. So I went to see the Fantastic Four movie the other week, and I realised that I was watching all the old ones, the older ones, like the early 2000s, late 2000s, and I recognised that a lot of the scenes sort of pointed at Jessica Alba as this, and they were just inappropriate comments, didn't really help with the storyline.
Yeah.
This new one, in fact, totally sort of gone into the story and has not sexualised women in any way. It's sort of empowered them.
Yeah.
Now, that shift or that progressive attitude towards women has been in film.
Yeah.
Do you think the same can be said for business?
No.
And how or why?
Because business is still predominantly male dominated. Most SMEs, the majority of SMEs in Britain are owned by men. Only 1 in 6 businesses in Britain is started up and run by women. So that's a very, very, very short answer. I think if you look at the creative industries as a whole, and I'm a huge fan because I have a creative arts degree. Creative arts is generally more inclusive because it has better representation, more neurodivergent people in it, more women in it. So there's going to be that more seemingly progressive agenda. And the creative arts and the creative industries will lead on that, and they're quite right to lead on that, and we need to see more of that. Business is the opposite end of the scale. So if you have the sort of innovators and early adopters as being the creative industries at the opposite end, you've probably got potentially business. Not all business. There'll be certain niche businesses or third sector or charity or social enterprise that might have a more progressive agenda. But generalised, corporate business, we've seen, and I'll give you an example in return. I actually work with an organisation called We Are the City, and they have a technology awards ceremony in London each year for the rising stars in the technology sector for women. And this year they had some corporate companies refuse to pay for tickets for these women to attend the event, even though they'd won an award, because it was seen as a DEI and a gender event. So when I say we're turning the clock back, we're going back again, we're really going back. So these aren't tiny companies, these are really big players, and because they might be American companies, or because they might be worried about their shareholder capacity and capabilities, maybe predominantly male shareholders, for example, we're seeing that narrative again. And we're almost going back to, are we actually starting the women's suffrage movement again? Are we going to have to go back to burning our bras, which is what happened in the 1960s? Is how do we make that progress? But in answer to your question, the short answer is no.
Okay. Because where I was going to lead on from that, where I'm leading on from that, is you could probably give me better statistics on this, but it's widely known that women perform better in business as business owners than men.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
That's a really good question. I think it's because they work harder, they're more loyal. If you look at sales as going to what we're alluding to, what we were talking about earlier, women make better salespeople, and that's statistically proven, higher levels of trust. I think women are more conscientious. If you actually look at, they're methodical. If you look at everything that women generally have to manage and how they're multitasking at any one time, they're the people that you want doing the job, really, if I'm honest. But I'm a huge believer in it's not a man-hating exercise from my point of view. And I have been accused of being misandrist before, which is the opposite of misogynist. But it's not true. We need equality and we need equal teams. And I think from my point of view, I've always made that point. But why employ women over men? I just think they're more productive. I don't think they have higher focus, and I think they take things more seriously. And genuinely, I think women, take life more seriously because they bring life into the world. They know what's at stake. And also, if you, even from a male-based point of view, and if there's any male business owners or directors out there listening to this, if you put one woman on your board, your profitability increases by 67%. Now, these aren't just nice things to do that you should be, and I'm saying if you are really a business person, it doesn't matter how you identify, if you really want to make money, you should be employing more women. And you should have more diversity and inclusion, and you should support and you should fund women's businesses. Now, the UK governments, and I say government, so we make it apolitical, have done loads and loads of studies on this. So, for example, the Rose Review, which was done by the previous government in 2019, showed that if women's businesses were correctly funded at the point of inception, it would put 250 billion per annum into the UK economy. Now, to give you a comparison of what that actually means, the royal family brings in 2.5 billion. So you can look at this, the scale of difference there. So from my point of view, it's always been, well, why aren't we doing it? Now, the current government have got a task force called the Invest in Women Task Force, which you can find on LinkedIn or online, and they're actually currently raising millions of pounds to actually distribute to women's businesses and startups, and that's really important. because in order to create the jobs for the next generations, we need more businesses. And if we're flatlining economically, which we are currently, if you actually look at, I think you're saying we're still leading in the G7, but I don't think that's necessarily true, then we've got to be having an eye to what are we doing in the future? How are we going to create these cool jobs, for our, people to thrive? And how are we going to create better businesses? And the answer is going to be just more equity and inclusion.
Interesting. Because where I was going with that is the gender pay gap still a thing? And why is it still a thing after what you just said?
We haven't got time. Yes, the gender pay gap is still a thing. And I think my simple answer is, if you've got men who mostly own the businesses, that's why the gender pay gap is a thing. And that's it. Mostly male shareholders, mostly male orientated, mostly male directors. It's still always going to be a thing. Because if I can make more money off your work, why would I want to pay you more? And this has been, what the whole women's suffrage movement, was about, which is about equal rights, equal pay. But I actually say, because people say, well, will you want equality? I say, no, we don't want equality, we want equity, which is a different thing. Because men and women are different. But, just because you're different doesn't mean that you should be paid less for doing the same job. I mean, I worked in sales a long time, and I remember being employed once, and I found out one of my male colleagues was getting paid on a basic salary 10 grand more a year than I was. Yeah, I was outperforming him. And that really, really didn't go down well, because I was earning more overall. So again, it makes you very unpopular. But sales is probably one of the only environments where that for women can actually happen. But it's not an attractive industry to be in, because it is quite toxic and quite masculine. So you've got to be built a very special way to survive in it. For sure.
Fair enough.
For sure.
Fair enough. So you've gone the long way round, but I wanted to build an image or build a picture of the fact that you do stand for women, you do support women.
Yeah.
And we come back to that original point that you do like to help people and support people and communities. Now, bringing us back then, so you spent years or 33 or you spent a career in sales.
Lifetime. Yeah.
So you did a career in sales, and then you came out and started the Startup Business Network.
Yeah.
What fueled you to actually start that business network then?
I think I got to a point where I had left corporate, and I thought I knew, honestly, I thought I probably knew a lot. And then I realised I knew nothing when I actually went out and started up. And you've gone through this journey, and I've gone through this journey, and I'm like over a decade in now. Startup is less about running a business and more about the emotional and psychological journey that you're undergoing to actually find out who you are after years often in corporate, which is what people often struggle with when they start up, is that they've had the safety of a corporate job, they've perhaps worked for somebody else, but all of a sudden you're doing everything from, answering the phone to making the teas and coffees. There isn't that structure there isn't that support there. Nobody cares what you do. You put out a post and you think everybody's reading it, and nobody cares. So I think that's what motivated me to start the group, was because it was really lonely. And I think that as a woman it was really lonely. But also I'd actually started to talk to other people who were saying it's really lonely and I don't talk to anybody, and I'm working 12 hours a day and my family don't get it, and I don't know what to do, and my marriage is under strain. And I was like, oh, hang on a minute, I can't be the only person that feels like this. So there was 9 of us originally in the pub, and saying, no, it's not just you're not going quietly mad. It's very hard and it's very toxic. And I think as your roles change in your family, especially for women, where they might have moved away from perhaps having a corporate role or a different job with all that sort of predictable income coming in, we were hearing very much people sort of saying, well, my husband's not really happy about this because it's taking me away from doing the housework or being with the family. And I was like, really? That's still a thing? And I just thought there was that need for the support. And I thought, well, if I need it, there's a chance that other people might need it. And we found that it wasn't just a female thing. We had neurodivergent men that were saying the same thing. We had people from different minorities and communities saying, I can't get the support, I can't get the loans, I can't get... And I thought, well, I've got all this knowledge of how to build businesses, and I just think actually it's time that I use that knowledge to help others. And I think for me that was the primary driver.
Interesting. So you alluded there to people's partners, husbands, wives, whatever, not being supportive.
Yeah.
How important is it in business to have a supportive partner?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's the difference between success and failure. I think if you look at, and there's probably a bunch of statistics, and I'm not going to quote them because I haven't got the right ones in my brain at the moment, but if you look at the divorce rate in entrepreneurship, I would say it's probably quite high. But entrepreneurs are 500% more likely to have ADHD. So, and we've seen certainly from the 10,000 founders we've helped that over 97% of those people have had some sort of additional needs. That might be dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD. So these are people that probably don't fit the neurotypical spec of wanting a job, or perhaps due to mental health or their own health can't work office hours. So I think, entrepreneurship gets a bad rap in terms of, everybody thinks that you're going to start up and make £1 million in the first 3 years, and it doesn't. It doesn't work like that. It's going to take you a good, 10 years to get your brand established, 20 years to start a solid business. And then by that time, you're probably handing it to the next generation if you've got children. So, yeah, it's a crazy world, and it's not for everybody.
Agreed. Because, I'd be interested to find out how many, divorces happened with people who started off in a relationship where they didn't have a business, and then they started the business. They changed their whole train of life. They changed the whole direction.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see the figure on that. That'd be a cool one to find out. Anyway, thought out in the open. So, okay, that's why you started the Startup Network. What has been some key takeaways for you that you've learnt since operating the network?
Taking care of people is really important. I think listening is really important. I think challenging societal norms is really important, because we're now bigger in this region than the FSB and the Chamber of Commerce combined. And everybody still says, but you haven't got a network because we can't see you in a room with people having, rubber sausages and bounce off the floor eggs at a breakfast networking meeting. And I'm like, mate, you're like living in the last century if you think that's how people network now. And I think that is one of the biggest barriers. But ironically, it allows you so much freedom to operate, because if you understand technology and you understand people and you understand how to look after people and help them build what they want and help them build their freedom and their escape, then you're always going to have a part in everybody's lives. And I think for me, I was reading one of my school reports, and it was hilarious actually, because I was bullied relentlessly at school when I was about 15, 16. But I read my school reports from before then, and it actually says a very popular girl in my reports. And it's hilarious really when you think about it, because looking back, I wouldn't have thought that I ever really was, but I'm just a real social person. And this is like, the first thing I'll say is everybody all right? Is everybody upright? Because if everybody's upright, it's a good day. I will say every day above ground is a good day. Has everybody been fed? Is everybody well? There's the next parameter. And if somebody's having an off moment, are they okay? Is there anything that person needs? And then you go to whatever it is after that. I think people forget that people are human, and often that a lot can be solved by a good meal and rehydration. And I think that if you've grown up in a family where there's any element of ADHD or neurodivergence, you understand those behaviours perhaps more than broader society does, which often makes you better with people and perhaps more caring than the average person. But people aren't disposable assets. I think that's what a lot of people think in business, is that employees are, well, I'll just get somebody else in. So like, why why you're not picking the right people in the first place then, and that's on you. If you're saying your staff aren't doing their job properly, that's because you aren't doing your job properly as a leader. And unfortunately, there's many people that won't look at themselves first. It's always much easier to go, oh, look, put my little fingers out and pointing at other people, than actually, oh, look, it could be me. Because we're not encouraged in business to do that level of navel gazing, because business is a very male-dominated environment. And typically that's not a thing that men do well. And again, that's a problem with our society again. We need to encourage men to be more open, more, support men more fully. Look at the rates of suicide in certain sectors, including construction, then it's extremely high. And that's because of, the pressure of society to think that men should cope with everything. That's not fair either. So it's about how can we be more compassionate, I think, from my point of view.
Fair enough. So what would you say, after working with so many different startup businesses from different sectors and all the above, what would you say the main thing startups don't address that they need to address?
I think people need to be realistic about themselves when they first start. They're very, very... A lot of people do it for the wrong reasons. So a lot of people start up and say, I'm going to do it because I want to get rich quick. To be honest, you're probably going to be richer working for somebody else. So work for somebody else, do it as a side gig, and just work hard at it. There's an element of massive ego that goes with entrepreneurialism, and you need that. But equally, people lack humility, generally. And also, often the biggest barrier is the business owner. Is their inability. There's two mindsets in entrepreneurship. There's what we call a fixed mindset, which is this is the way we're going to do it, my way or the highway, and those are the people that fail. Or there's a growth mindset, which is I've come across a problem. Who do I get in to help me with that problem? How do I think we should get over that problem? Now, Alec, what do you think we should do to get over that problem? And then you bring in the collective brains and the people who are much cleverer than you, because everybody's cleverer than you. Everybody. I might strive to be the best, but I know that there's people out there who are much cleverer than I am, much better than I am, everything, in every single facet of life. But you're fundamentally who you are, and people will buy you. And again, startups, I think they underestimate how important their personal brand is, because people will buy from people who they like and who they know and who they trust. And if you haven't got good ethics and if you haven't got good morals and you're trying to screw people over, you're not going to last for very long. You might make money quite quickly, but you're not going to last the distance. You're just not. And the statistics tell us that, because 80% of startups fail in the first 5 years and 97% fail by year 10.
Wow.
So if you're in year 10 or beyond, you're sitting in the top 3%. And those are the people that you really need to look to and listen to and understand, and really look at how good they are and understand how they've got there and how they've survived that first 5 years and how they've then survived another 5. And I think startups look to the wrong people for advice and support often, because sometimes they just don't know who to go to. And that was the whole reason that we started Startup Disruptors, which was a trusted network of people that can help.
Great. I mean, yeah, there is a lot of noise out there. So much noise. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, it's just trial and error with guidance, I think. Yeah. Okay, so that's where we currently are.
Yeah.
Where do you see the Startup Disruptors going?
So I've just built, I use the word we because it is a word we, we've just built an education technology platform to actually help our Startup Disruptors network get more access to better education, to help them start up. So founder to founder based learning, but also accredited education from business schools and universities from across the UK and internationally. So our mission on that is to actually help 10 million people start up businesses both in the UK and internationally in the next 10 years. And that's using founder-led information, so learning from founders, but also learning from some academic business models. But instead of a vanilla-based platform, because it doesn't sound very sexy and exciting that way, it's actually going to be designed using AI and machine learning to be bespoke to each individual that uses it. So it will design the teaching and deliver that teaching in a way that you will actually want to learn. So we've all been, I mean, I've been to university, I'm very blessed, we've all been, and it's like very what I call push out learning, which is, one to many. And actually we've moved away from that now. People want to learn in, a way that they like to learn. So it might be visual, so it might be through video, it might be through auditory, it might be through podcasts. But you will go, you'll answer a few short questions on the platform, and then you'll have your bespoke learning, and off you go, and you'll be able to get more support to start a business from people that have done it, which is the most important thing.
Makes sense.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Okay, someone who's we're going back in. So someone who's seen the progress of the internet, of the use of the digital age.
I just say it, I'm just as old as you. Yeah.
And the introduction of AI.
Yeah.
And for someone who's now adopting AI to use as part of the business.
Yeah.
Fantastic, great. But what about those who are left behind?
Yeah.
What about those who do become obsolete? Using them as disposable now, that's what businesses are doing. No, I don't know. But what happens to those people who are left behind, in your opinion?
I don't think that this is anything new. So if you at school did anything about the Industrial Revolution, where they went into the factories and smashed up the machines because they thought they were going to lose their jobs, it's just the same thing. I would say what we're going to see is a shift in the skills that are going to be valued in the next 2 decades. So historically, things that have been valued have been things like writing, process orientated, detail orientated. AI will and has already smashed that. Sorry, anybody out there that doesn't know that. So you'll see a lot of what we would call historic jobs that have been very much based around being a good citizen, learning rote things, everything that the education system supports in terms of producing people that are going to go out into the workplace. Those days are gone because AI has replaced. It's a knowledge-based network. So in essence, there's more knowledge out there than ever before. The people that are going to be left behind are going to be the people that won't accept the new technology. And I've seen this a lot in my own age group, which is, well, I'm not going to be replaced because I'm at the top of my game. And no, actually, you are. And also people that don't embrace learning digital technology. So, for example, I'm not a digital native. I didn't grow up with the interwebs. I grew up with dial-up, and having to literally have a landline where I would dial it up. It would be dialing up, and if somebody else in another part of the house picked up the phone, it would interrupt the signal and you'd have to dial up again. It would take 35 minutes to download a tiny bit of an image. So I've been, right through the ringer. But what I would actually say with AI is it's moving so fast that whatever was happening last week isn't, valid this week. And in 3 weeks' time, it'll be ahead again. So you just looked at the launch of GPT-5, for example. It's phenomenal.
It is.
What it's able to do. But the good news is it lowers the barriers to entry for starting a business for the first time. We've actually seen in the States, I believe, there's a chap who's just sold a business that he's built using third-party AI for $88 million. Apps are now able to be built via AI. Websites are now able to be built via AI, so we don't necessarily need coders anymore. Although, from what we're seeing with Meta, they're having a scrap to get some of the best coding talent in the world with huge golden handshakes for people who obviously be able to code AI. So I think it's the most seismic change, and technology has moved faster in the last 10 years than it has in the previous 50 years. So we're seeing a seismic shift, and people just aren't ready. I mean, I'm doing an AI workshop soon on the basis of, and I think the working title of that is AI, we can obviously help you learn what you need to learn before you get left behind. But I do think it's very much something that people don't have to be a victim of. It's that they're choosing to be a victim of. because I think that natural curiosity sometimes, because it's free for everybody. There's not a cost barrier here. It's just that natural curiosity of saying, I'll just go around and have a play around with it. I think the cost barrier is, it's very low. But again, what we're seeing in Britain, and again, this is a political statement, I suppose, we've got a massive digital skills gap. So the problem is endemic in the UK, that actually we haven't put enough into educating people in the right way. And certainly it's probably not even your age group. It's probably all the people that own the businesses who were in their 40s, 50s, 60s and 70s. But I think a lot of people now in business, where it was started by baby boomers, are now handing on the businesses to the next generation, and those people are much more digitally savvy. So they're kind of saying, well, actually, how do we change the business very quickly from this model to actually embracing more AI? But also they're kind of only using it to drive operational costs down. So there's a whole raft of then ethics around, well, actually, if you're binning everybody, I mean, we can use large corporate as an example, where a lot of call centres, where they went offshore, are now being replaced altogether by AI. So chatbots, voice recognition, it's all change. But look, it will continue to change, and really, really fast. And I think that's why people feel left behind, because you just feel like this week, I just got used to ChatGPT 4. And now there's this whole raft, because GPT is only one element. You've got so many other elements. You've got Microsoft's version, you've got Copilot, and it was, and then you get to head explosion territory of which one is it that I'm supposed to be learning about, because I can't learn them all. And it's like, well, you don't have to. You just need to know the nerd that knows them. So it's exactly that. I just think in Britain we're particularly bad at asking for help. And we're not good at investing in ourselves in terms of learning and education, because education in this country, unless you go to university, is free. There's many countries where you don't get education at all, and it's certainly not free. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to go on in the next 2 decades, and I think it's really exciting. It's an exciting time to be alive. People would disagree with me, but I think it's an exciting time to be alive.
I think it's exciting if you know how to work and build relationships with those people who know what they're doing, and also be malleable enough to learn the new softwares. But I guess this is more of a thought or a statement, or you can feel free to fire back. But I don't know, since the rise of social media, since the rise of technology, people have always compared themselves. But with do you know what I mean? Like, he's doing better, I'm doing this. But with the rise of social media, it's becoming more, everyone, this mental health crisis due to social media has only been on the increase. Now, my point, or my thought, is if with the introduction of AI, something that can do something in seconds, is that not just going to make the mental health crisis get worse, because people are going to be now comparing themselves not only against other people but against the machine?
That's a deep question. I like it. So I'm going to say something. Social media and social comparison has been around for centuries. In the old days, before technology, it used to be you could look out the window at your neighbour's drive and they got a new car, and you'd be comparing, because you think, well, I've got a clapped out old car, they've got a new car, how do they get the money? Social comparison's been around since time began. I can imagine. I just want to say to everybody out there, social media is not true. If anybody genuinely believes that what anybody puts on social media is true, that's the first lesson that, as an old fart, I can tell you is absolutely the biggest lie. It's the edited, highlighted, reframed, filtered best version of the best things that everybody's doing in their life. That's not reality, and that's never been reality. Most people are generally lucky if they can get out of bed, look after their families, go to work, have a job, keep a job, and have some money to spare at the end of the month. And that's the reality of life, generally. The problem is, I don't think it's social media that's the issue. It's people's acceptance of the reality of what life actually is that is the issue. Because everybody thinks, oh, I want this aspirational lifestyle of this guy's got a Rolex, you know, this person got. They haven't. They just haven't. You can hire Rolexes for Instagram. You can borrow, you know, you can get fake cases of cash. You can, you know, rent Bentleys, but that is not true. So I think I would say to people, I often find it a bit laughable when people say, you know, it's true life. I think the mental health thing is I think you're right, that's very dangerous, but I would again say it's more about how much time people are spending on screens that we should be more concerned about. So the average adult in Britain spends about 6.7 hours a day on their screen, and what you're doing is you're rewiring your brain. Now if your children have access to that screen and they're young and they're impressionable, that's a big problem, because their brains aren't, their frontal lobes, especially in men, aren't developed until they're 25. So what we're doing is we need more human accountability around, A, should I be, as a grown person, on my screen for that long? No. And secondly, should I be giving my screen to children? No, probably not. But it's just an easy win if you want to keep the kids quiet. And you know, and I accept that. But I think we need to have more accountability around our own lives, and sort of saying, you know, it's like me. I've struggled with my weight all my life. It's not genetic. It's because I like food too much. So I have to have a level of accountability around that. Okay. And there's been periods in my life where I've been skinny and fat, you know, and we're on that never-ending roller coaster. But that's nobody's fault but my own. So I think for me, it's about, you have to take personal accountability around saying, A, who am I looking at for a start off? Who am I comparing myself against? And if you're a working class kid and you're comparing yourself against somebody who's got money with an ultra high net worth family in the States, then it's not a fair social comparison. So again, I would say, well, actually, are you doing okay? What are your goals? What's your focus? What do you want to do to become the best version of yourself? What would good look like for you? Because what good looks like for this person over here might not be anything near what you value or what aligns with your moral compass. So just be very careful who you're comparing yourself against. But yeah, it's a crazy world.
It is a crazy world.
Tech and technology, you know, when I was young, I suppose all we had to worry about was looking at Cosmopolitan magazine's front covers, and we had, you know, the supermodels who were like, you know, when I was growing up, and I'm like short, fat and round with ginger hair, and I had like Cindy Crawford, you know, the comparison is the same. But again, it's the responsibility of society to be more responsible in a way of how we're sexualising women or the role models that we're putting up. And again, we just need to see more normal people role models. And actually we've got them in our communities, we've got them in society. We should be actually saying these people are more important. Yeah, but we don't do that because actually our society celebrates narcissism, and that's what social media is fueled by. Hey, look at my selfie. I'd be very, very worried by anybody's social media that's just full of selfies of themselves. I can't love anybody more than I love me. It's you know, it's a giveaway. But you have to know how people operate and how humans operate. And when you're young, it's difficult because you're still learning the social mores of society. You're still struggling to find your identity. You know, there's so many mental health issues wrapped up in technology. But it's just responsible use of it. And that is, you know, down to parents, if they're parents, and down to us as grown-ups, if we're grown-ups. It sounds far too simple, doesn't it, really? It's true. It's true. It's true.
Gosh, the harsh reality.
I know.
Well, okay, cool. We'll put a pin in it there then. So, with you, what are we to expect next?
Oh, I don't know. So we're launching, obviously, our focus groups. So we're taking our EdTech platform out to our customers for Desk to Educate. We're getting some feedback on that. We've got agreement with a couple of universities currently to actually accredit our learning and content, which is really cool. We've got 50 plus corporates and SMEs signed up to actually help us test trial it when we take it to market. So I think working on that is probably the priority at the moment. Probably enjoying life. So I like to a lot. I do. I love it, and I'm a huge dog lover, which everybody probably knows. So I've still got a puppy that's coming up for 1, who's a Labrador and very, very active. So looking after her. And I've said to Dan, who's my husband, I said, can we have another dog? And he said no. So there might have to be another dog in the works in the fullness of time, and just continuing to, do the best work that I can do, and serve people in the best way that I can, and just be the best version of myself, which that has actually involved me going swimming. So I've started swimming again in the last few weeks.
In the sea?
Swimming, not in the no, not with the sewage.
I was going to say
no, in a leisure centre, not far away from here. But yeah, it's that chasing the fitness as you get older is important. It's important for your health. But apart from that, enjoying life, because it's a privilege. And we're all lucky to be here. Do you know the odds of being born human?
Go for it.
4.7 trillion to 1.
Jesus.
So you've already won the lottery by being here, not turning up as a sparrow or, a cabbage. But I would say to people, don't forget that it's a privilege to be alive. And my nan always used to say to me, there's somebody in the cancer ward that would swap with you in a heartbeat. And don't ever take your health for granted. I think that's really important. So I think say to people, you might think that money is the thing that will make you happy, but actually what will make you happy is feeling grounded in yourself, having a good social network of people around you that are genuine, a good community, and being a good human being. And money can't buy that. Wealth can't buy that. So just remember that you are blessed to be here, that there's nobody like you, and you're irreplaceable. We're all unique and irreplaceable. And enjoy life. Crack on.
Fair enough. Wow. Becky. It's been good.
I know, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for asking me some searching questions, which I had to think about.
Well, you're welcome.
Appreciate it.
That's real. But, okay, great. So we'll put a pin in it there, and I look forward to seeing what happens next. And
Thank you so much.
Closely.
Yeah, thanks very much for your time. Been an absolute pleasure.
You're welcome. All right, well, let's crack on with part 2.
Okay.
Becky, we made it to part 2. And I'm excited for this part. So, cool. Part 2 is when we go out into the street, and so we went out into the street of Portsmouth and we asked the question. We don't reveal what the question is. You're about to find that out. Feel free to stop it, feel free to react, feel free to watch it to the end. I don't know how long it is, I think it's about 2.5, 3 minutes. So whatever you feel, and then we'll have a discussion.
Okay.
So, let's go. Who do you think should be able to run a startup network?
What do you mean?
Do you know what a startup network is?
Like a startup business?
Yeah, so imagine a group of startup businesses are part of this group and call it a network. Who do you think should be at the top leading that group?
Whoever wants to run it.
Hell yeah. Do you know what a startup network is?
No, I can guess, but I'd be guessing.
So basically it's like a group of startup businesses that are part of this group, and they label it a startup network. Now at the top of that network, who do you think should be the leader of it?
I'm fundamentally opposed to all leadership, mate.
Oh yeah.
Can't make it more of a group cooperative, I'd say.
Hell yeah. What about yourself?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, definitely.
Leadership
never works. Leadership never works. You always get some idiot telling you, oh, you got to do this or you got to do that. No. Democracy is a better system, I think.
Do you know what a startup network is?
In what respect?
A startup business network.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, cool. So who do you think should be able to lead one of those networks?
Anyone that's got a stakeholder interest in the business. Doesn't matter about the age or the experience or anything at all. You can be very young and understand what you want and the market you're going into and how you're going to build it. Yes, you're going to need guidance from different parts of community and the world and business to help you achieve those goals, but just because you're young or old doesn't stop you from having the right ideas and what you want to push for. So, yeah, could be anybody really.
Do you know what a startup network is?
In what context?
So like a startup business network.
So I'm guessing it's going to be the people that you know around your social network that can help you start a business.
Yeah, in a way. So basically, it's like a group of startups that work and collaborate together. So who, in your opinion, should be the leader of that group?
Maybe the one that's got the most money.
Interesting. Do you want to expand?
Pardon?
Do you want to expand?
I mean, I guess with any business, I think money's going to be the figurehead of the whole process. So I guess the one with the most money is going to have the best ability to kind of help with the startup, I guess.
Cool. So that was the question. What are your thoughts?
I think it's really interesting, isn't it, that generally you become quite enveloped in what you're doing, that most people have absolutely no clue what a startup network is or a startup business network is on a basic level. So yeah, it's quite interesting to see the different views. Yeah, some quite polarised views there, which is quite interesting, which I like. I like that. It's really important to have different views.
So what are your thoughts on individuals? So the guy who said he doesn't believe in any type of leadership, what's your thoughts on that?
I think he's probably not wrong. But I think when it comes down to it, if you don't have leadership, then you don't have democracy in the first place. That's a wider political debate, I think. That's a very politically motivated statement. He's probably talking more about politics, which I actually probably quite agree with in this country at the moment. But I think it's interesting because when you look at cooperative models, they do work very well. And I think with Startup Disruptors as a community, it has always been much more about how does everybody help everybody else. So I do think you can have a level of cooperation within a community, and you should have. That's how communities fundamentally operate anyway. But there's some very interesting views, especially when you had to kind of explain a bit more about, well, what do you mean? In what context? It's like, well, isn't it self-explanatory? But yeah, it's quite interesting.
You think so?
Yeah.
You would think so. I mean, so what are your thoughts of someone having no experience then leading a startup business network?
I think if they have no experience and they're attracting like-minded people that also have no experience, then that's absolutely fine. I don't get into judging other people by what they do. I'm probably really boring to interview in terms of that, because I would actually say that's brilliant, because the more people that come to the party, the better, because the more attention then startup or business would get. So, and I think there's actually benefit to having no experience in many ways, because you're not sort of brainwashed in the ways of business or how things should be done. You're seeing things from a whole new perspective. So I would be quite interested to go to a group that would have that agenda, just to see what their mindset was about. So to me, it's always how do you learn and continuously learn. And I think we can continuously learn, even if we perhaps, would stand in judgment and say, well, that person hasn't got any experience. Do you know what? They might do it better because they haven't got all of those, sort of barriers in their own brain of all the things that they can't do.
Very interesting. Yeah, because I was going to ask there about, is age a factor? But at the same time, it all comes down to experience. So they kind of marry up, but or do they? How would you?
I don't know, because I don't know. Is age a factor though? Because you look at there's a lot of young entrepreneurs who start with lemonade stands on the parents' driveway, or I saw in a local Facebook group in Portsmouth on Keep Milton Green. Last Saturday there was 2 kids who decided that they wanted to do a bake sale and put all of their stuff outside the house, and it had all gone in an hour and 45 minutes, and I was most cross because I sent Dan out to get some and he said it's all gone, and I was like, they'd sold out in 2 hours. So I don't and that's entrepreneurship in its rawest form. When I was a kid, I used to go to like school fetes or school fairs, and I used to win raffle prizes, and I used to resell those to friends and family. And I think it starts very young, and I think very young if it's something that you've got in you or not, and it's very much linked to often neurodivergence. Because I remember many a time my mum saying, look, you can't resell raffle prizes to to their kids, and I'm like, yeah, but if they want a bag of lollies, and I can sell a bag of lollies, then fair exchange is no robbery. So but it's like, yeah, but you shouldn't be doing it. Well, why shouldn't you be doing it? So again, I just say I'd encourage anybody to have a go if they feel that they want to. Why not?
Hell yeah. Okay, cool. So I remember we spoke about in the main thing that being the loudest doesn't always make you the smartest, or something along those lines. Now, the guy at the end said the person with the most money should be at the top. Now, arguably, the person with the most money is arguably the loudest on social media because they can pay for paid ads, they can do all this stuff.
Yeah.
Would you say someone with the most money is the best person at leading the startup business network?
I think that's a really interesting view that you have about money, because if you've ever met people in Formula One that have what I call absolute, abject, unassailable wealth, they are not the loudest. They are the quietest, most sound individuals that you will ever meet. Very strong sense of self, often no need to be seen or heard, not interested in the spotlight. So again, I think it depends on, are you talking about old wealth, are you talking about new wealth, are you talking about social media wealth? Because there's so many ways of generating wealth. And is wealth different to money? Because how, again, that's another debate for another day, is how do you quantify it? Because is it new money, is it old money, is it money that's been handed down through generations, tends to be very quiet? Is it only new, very rich people that are very loud? Or is it kids from working class backgrounds that are very loud because they've always needed to do that to be seen or to be heard? But I think there's an interesting point you've raised there about social media now is a massive gateway to wealth for the first time, and I think that's the leveller. Through social influence, you look at a lot of the Instagram influencers, and that's what's annoying a lot of people, is they say, well, I remember I was on a panel for a young entrepreneur competition, and it was being judged by quite a few people who shall remain nameless. And they were coming at it all from their own perspective of what they thought a business should be. Now, a business is a profit-making enterprise. In essence, that's what a business is. Makes a profit, fair exchange, no robbery. And there was one guy, and he was a student, and he was putting together bespoke outfits that he was buying from Savile Row in London. So he was buying individual pieces that they no longer wanted, which weren't outfits that they could sell. And he was putting them together on Instagram and literally making unique one-off outfits. So it might be a blazer, a tweed blazer, a cravat, a watch to style, the whole look. And he was selling them, often for thousands of pounds. And I remember somebody in the room who was a white guy in his mid-60s saying, of all of the startups that they've seen, he said, and I think this guy on Instagram was making about $5-6 grand a month at this point, so a fair amount of money for somebody who's very young. And he said to me, but Becky, it's not even a proper business. And I said, he earns more than you earn in a year doing your day job. It's a proper business. And yet they didn't award him the prize for that competition because they felt it wasn't a proper, so it wasn't bricks and mortar. It wasn't like hairdressers or a barber's or or a clothing shop, and actually we've got to be really careful how we're quantifying businesses. Because actually, if you've got an Instagram business that's turning over more than the average salary is in the UK, which is £37,000 a year on average, you've got a business. He's making a profit, he wasn't making any losses, he's doing it from his dorm room, so he had no overheads. And again, it's about that judgment, it's about people who aren't qualified passing judgment on somebody who's actually doing it. And I think that's quite an interesting thing for people to think about. And it's the advent of social influence is so important because it's allowing people to start businesses in new ways and side hustles in new ways. And that, I think that's what's scaring people.
Interesting. So would you say the rise of social influencers has impacted... No, I was going in the wrong direction there. So, the point I was trying to make was, With startup networks, then, would you say if they're run by an influencer, they're more, let's just be controversial, they're more valuable?
How do you define value though?
Let's say to the individual. So it said like on the tin, you're going to get more profit, you're going to get more sales.
I think if somebody's starting a social influence business, then you should go to a social influencer. Because I'm always a big believer in you should go to the person that's already done it to show you how to do the thing. Because if they've done it, they already know how to do it. So what you're looking for is the shortcut to the best knowledge that you can get for the money that you've got in your pocket. So if you, that's why people watch Dragon's Den. You know, people go because these people have done it, they're very competent in what they do, they make good decisions, and they've got the leverage and they've got the social influence to a certain extent. So we talk about, I suppose social influence is the same as business influence. So business influence is obviously what Dragon's Den is, obviously great entertainment as well, so that's why people watch it. But if you look at how even that's shifted from since Stephen Bartlett's come in, you know, and people just come in now for Stephen. And we saw it. There's one of our guys in our community called Comfort, and they've literally just been on Dragon's Den. In fact, I think the last couple of weeks. And Comfort are doing sensory clothing for neurodivergent children with what they call poppets in the seams. So they've got seamless garments with stim tools in the seams, so that kids can feel more comfortable at school or at home. So they went in obviously to the Dragons to ask for money. They didn't get money on this occasion, but it's great exposure for them, you know, through the social media channels. So I think for me it's about how do you define influence? Because in business there will be people who you say, well actually go to this person because they know the answer to that. And that's what good community signposting should do as well, which is, I always say it's much more Derek Trotter than it is Steve Jobs. Is who knows the answer to the thing, you know, to the question that I'm looking for the answer to, and then I'm going to go and ask that person, and that's really the important thing. So I think in answer to your question, yes, if I was, you know, thinking actually this person has, you know, got 1 million followers on Instagram, they're a wellness and a lifestyle influencer, you should absolutely go and see how they've done it and look at the process of how they've done it. Because you can learn a lot just by watching and observing.
Big time. Just want your thoughts on this as well. There's been a real massive spike in, like, this is not the business, right? But in like wellness and well-being and fitness influence and all of this stuff, and follow my program to get this and get that. How do you filter through the noise?
How do I feel about that sector, or how do I?
In general, we could apply this to everything.
Yeah.
How do you filter through the noise? I remember you saying that go to someone who's done it before.
Yeah.
But how do you find that person? How do you know if they're telling the truth?
You don't. And that's the problem with social media, because it's people think that it's the people that shout the loudest that have got the answers, and actually that's not always true. So I think it goes back to how we've always communicated, which is within communities, which is, I would say, for anybody, especially who's younger, especially who might be more vulnerable if they're neurodivergent, I would ask around in your community first, who is the person that I can go to locally, that I can see face to face, or perhaps just have a phone call with, or perhaps I could go to one of their workshops and see if they're actually any good. Because one of the reasons we started up was to actually overcome what I call the charlatan effect. I saw a lot of people getting ripped off by business coaches, especially when I first started up. So I had a couple of women who'd got quite well established businesses come to me and say, I pay a business coach, 500 quid, he does 3 hours a month, he comes in, we have a bit of a chat, he tells me about his month, we look at a bit of a plan together, we discuss what I've done, and then he goes, and I'm like, so what do you get out of that then? And then after a year they haven't got an answer, because this is somebody that's just taking money off somebody who can often be vulnerable, because neurodivergent people are often vulnerable to being financially exploited and exploited in other ways. So we had a lot of people being ripped off. We had somebody else who had paid, she was very clever, she'd come out of corporate, she was a corporate psychologist, She'd just got a payoff of 20 grand because she'd taken redundancy. A guy came to her and said, I can build you a website. He took 20 grand off her. And she paid it up front. We had somebody else sign, 2 people sign up for leases on premises when they didn't have a customer, and then have to spend the best part of 15, 20 grand in court getting out of those leases because they didn't understand what they'd signed. So that's why I started. It was, and all these horror stories, and I was like, well, hang on a minute, how is this community even surviving if everybody is doing this to each other and everybody's really, you're hurting your own community. There's no protection here. So you kind of build the fort, and that's what Startup Disruptors always was at the start, was the safe place for people to go to say, I really don't know what I'm doing. Who do I trust? Because it's not this person's done this, and it's very finger pointy. But actually, business is more about focusing less on the finger pointing and more about the planning, the structure, how you get the financing, how that works, getting those really good coaches, linking to those really good founders, getting to really good, resources really quickly. And that's the gap. That's where the air gap is between the person who's sitting in their back bedroom and going, I want to start a business, but I've been trying it, it's not going anywhere, and it's lonely, and I'm feeling frustrated, and then somebody will say, oh, we'll go and speak to Becky will signpost you to do X, Y, Z. And sometimes people don't even come into our community for very long. It'd be like, actually, this is the thing you need to go and do, is go and do this programme, it's offered by this council, that's where you live, go and do that. And then it's done. And they're like, oh my God, I didn't even know that existed. So my aim has always been to help people as quickly as we can, push them in the right direction. Other business models tend to be, come and buy my programme, buy my plan. No. We've seen a lot of places where it's very prevalent in a lot of sectors, especially, it's not just wellness, coaching. It's literally, you pay us 10 grand and we'll do this amazing workshop. And actually it's just about feeding people's egos at the end of the day. And that's fine, there's a place for that. And there's some that are actually bordering on what I call being a cult, which is a different thing, which is a different level of social influence. And again, people can fall foul of that. So it's just about going to the people locally that you know and asking the right questions, I think.
Fair enough. Well, any last thoughts on the video?
No, we just need to do more work, don't we, about getting people to better understand what it does, and Startup Network does. But also, I suppose you're often asking people that don't have any interest in that anyway. This is always the thing when you go into the street and you sort of do vox pops around, the wonderful general public who won't have, 9 times out of 10, or probably 10 times out of 10, won't have zero interest at all in anything that we're doing. But I just think it just shows what an amazing city we have in Portsmouth, but also what opportunity there is for people, to build whatever they want. And as I said before, I'm a huge believer in we're at one of the most exciting times to build a business of all time. And more importantly, if people are getting fed up of working the 9 to 5 and they want to build their own wealth, now is the time. Now is the time to do that with all the technology that's out there. So go for it.
Big time. Well, Becky, that brings us to a lovely close.
Oh, thank you so much, Alec. It's been lovely.
It
It's lovely to see you. Thank you so
been
much.
lovely.
I'm so honoured to be here, and it's so lovely to see you. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Likewise. Lovely seeing you, and thank you for your time.
You're
It's been
welcome.
great. And look forward to staying in touch.
Yeah. See you soon.
See you soon.